Humayun Khan carries on. It is my very great privilege and honor to moderate this panel, so I'm just going to do a little intro, housekeeping sort of things. First of all, okay. Hello and welcome to Word on the Street, Word on the Street's great book stage. I'll be your host during this next event, which is featuring Farah Heron, Sonya Singh, and H.N. Khan. Do you prefer H.N. or Humayun? Humayun? Okay, great. Thank you to our accessibility sponsor for this event, Another Story Bookshop, for ensuring that Word on the Street is able to keep improving access to our program. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the history of the place where we are gathered today. The city of Toronto exists because of the Toronto Purchase, also known as Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation in 1805, with a final claim settlement in 2010. This territory is the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, an agreement between the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Mississaugas of the New Credit to care for and share the resources around the Great Lakes in peace, which we all now share responsibility in upholding. The Dish with One Spoon was born in part out of the Anishinaabe concept of all our relations, which is the awareness that we are connected to and reflected in all the living and non-living beings around us. Toronto is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people with long histories of this land, and this is the first step in building a practice of land stewardship and Indigenous solidarity that honors these people. Now please join me in welcoming Farah Heron, who is the author most recently of Kamala Khan Carries On, which was, sorry, Kamala, I use my own title, Kamala Knows Best, which is delightful. Farah is a critically acclaimed writer of romantic comedies for adults and teens. Her books have been praised in Entertainment Weekly, USA Today, and the Globe and Mail, and have been named as Best Books of the Year by CBC Books and NPR. She lives in Toronto with her family. Sonya Singh is the author of Sorry, Not Sorry. She's a former entertainment reporter turned PR wizard who has followed her dream of telling stories in front of the camera and now behind the scenes. Her debut novel, Sorry, Not Sorry, is an ode to her own personal dating experiences during which she honed the art of writing the perfect breakup email/text. And Humayun Khan is the author of Wrong Side of the Court. He's a first-time author born in Pakistan. He immigrated to Canada at the age of 7 and grew up in Regent Park, a low-income community housing project. After graduating with a business degree, he decided to drop out of law school to pursue a career in Toronto's startup scene. Since then, he's helped build and market software that's used by millions around the world. Very cool. He's a recent graduate from Humber's School of Writers correspondence program. So welcome to all three writers. We're so pleased to have you here. At this point, I'm going to ask all the writers to give us a little taste of their books. And so I'm going to start with Farah Heron from Kamala Knows Best.
Hello, can you guys all hear me? Okay, so this is Kamala Knows Best. It came out in March. It is a rom-com. It's a retelling of Jane Austen's Emma, set in Toronto, set in a South Asian community in Toronto. I'm going to start from the very first page. Kamila Hussain didn't have a lot to complain about in her life. She realized that self-loathing was all the rage amongst her millennial peers, but in her opinion, she didn't have much to loathe. She was blessed with a steady income as an accountant at Emerald, her father's accounting firm. She loved her job and had recently redesigned her office with soothing pastels and stress-relieving greenery, so it was a joy to be there. She had no shortage of friends, and if she wanted a little something more, she had no problem finding dates or hookups. She enjoyed her living situation, a quaint brownstone in Toronto's east side that had been recently redone. And of course, she had Darcy, her adorable Bichon Frise. Darcy was arguably the cutest dog east of Yonge Street, and he had more Instagram followers than many reality stars, and he had gone full-on viral on TikTok 5 times. But in her own eyes, the most significant of Camila's blessings was her father. Dad was easily the sweetest, kindest, most supportive parent in existence. Being a daddy's girl was such a cliche, but Camila had no shame in telling anyone that she happily lived and worked for her father. He wouldn't do well alone, and Dad deserved to be happy and healthy more than anyone in the world. In fact, it was for him that she was awake at 8 on a Saturday morning, even after she was muddling fruit for Virgin Caparinas pretty late last night. Dad's annual physical was in a few days, and she'd intended to do whatever she could to make sure his blood pressure and cholesterol was in line. She couldn't leave the men to fend for themselves for breakfast this time. Nope, no eggs fried in ghee and boiled chai on her watch. She smoothed her robin's egg blue apron over her red floral full-skirted dress and admired her kitchen prep. The toast toppings she'd mashed, diced, and sliced were in colorful handmade Portuguese bowls that glowed against the white marble countertops. She snapped a pic and uploaded. Hashtag dream kitchen, hashtag blessed, hashtag home cooking. Camila is cooking, Rohan said from the stairs. Isn't this the third sign of the apocalypse? She glared at him. Shush you, or you don't get any. Rohan was still in his pajamas, a matched button-up set. Did he dress like this even when alone at home? His hair needed to be combed and his chin needed a shave, but somehow Rohan still managed to exude the air of the powerful corporate executive he was. Hearing his voice, Darcy's ears perked up and rushed to him, because of course it did. The only human in existence that Darcy loved as much as Camila and Dad was Rohan, despite the fact that Rohan was usually indifferent to her. Camila really needed to have a girl-to-girl with her dog about when to ease off when your affections weren't returned. Rohan chuckled at the dog while rubbing his fingers over the scruff on his own chin. Camila put her hands on his hips. No snark from you today, mister. Dad needs to eat better. Every weekend he fries eggs in ghee. I'm looking forward to trying something new, Dad said from behind the stairs. Camila takes such good care of me. Can I help you, Betty? Camila looked carefully at her father's eyes as he reached the bottom step. They looked a little tired, which was expected for early on a Saturday, but there was a hint of amusement and contentedness there, too. Good. Camila spent a great deal of time studying her father's eyes. It helped that they were so expressive. Some people wore their heart on their sleeves, but Qasim Hussein showed it in his eyes. I got it, Dad. You go and sit. I'll pour your tea.
Thank you, Farah. That was great. And your novel, of course, is a retelling of Emma,
It is a retelling of Emma.
which we will get into. And as a fellow Jane Austen fan, I loved it. Can I ask Sonya Singh to, Sonya, you want to read an excerpt from Sorry, Not Sorry?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm so excited. This is my debut, Sorry, Not Sorry. And I'm going to read from chapter 3. So my protagonist, Manny, is walking into the breakup agency that she owns for the day. So I'll start with Dear Breakup, and every chapter of the book actually starts with a Dear Breakup letter. Dear Breakup, what about putting the brakes on my relationship with my current girlfriend? I was dabbling in online apps, strictly out of boredom and curiosity, and I met this new girl, and I'm intrigued. Why can't I just hit pause with my girlfriend of 2 years, Daniel? I stepped off the elevator into the frenzy that always followed a media segment. The office floor buzzed with bright young men and women attending to their tasks, while the beautiful sounds of ringing phones and clacking keyboards filled the air. Yes, that's right, we were featured on Good Day with Alex and Maggie this morning. The team's excitement was palpable as they answered phones, while no doubt calculating their next bonus. To a first-timer, the call center would have looked like complete mayhem. But the truth was that my staff was organized and effective, attending to our clients with near military precision. I like to see my staff working. That's how I preferred to start each morning. It was one of the qualities that I found appealing with Adam, the way he talked about his team with pride and fondness. He loved being not only their leader, but also their biggest cheerleader. Now I had that connection with my team too. I pushed through the private client entrance, moving far away from the noise of the team. The matte black glass doors, etched with the breakup logo, closed behind me as I entered a serene, soundproof lounge. My shoes echoed across the gray and white hardwood, which added a soft glow to the room, providing a temporary distraction to clients who had come to split with someone they had once cared for. Soft music and the soothing sounds from a waterfall filled the air, triggering a relaxed feeling for the person who was about to go into panic mode at the thought of hiring us. Strategically placed reading material offered tips on being single and ready to mingle or alone and ready to bone, whichever the client wanted. The walls, a subtle purple, were complemented by flattering lights that created the effect of a perpetual golden hour. After all, if you happen to catch a glimpse of yourself in the mirrors, it helped to have the perfect light to enhance your soon-to-be single features. Clients who lacked confidence also lacked the resolve to carry through with their breakups. The better you thought you looked, the more comfortable you were with being single. It was that simple. "Morning, Manny," Anjali, our office manager, said as she popped up from behind the reception desk. The executive offices were behind the client lounge, away from the hustle and bustle of the busy call center. "You were such a boss babe on that segment this morning. You totally slayed it. And was it me, or just did Maggie have a lot of..." Anjali waved her hand around her face and lingered around her forehead. "Yep, a little bit too much, huh? But she's one of our clients, so we respect all of the decisions that Maggie makes, even if they're bad ones." I placed my coffee in red box with the Aja Raja logo on the glass desk. "Is Rajiv actually selling Diwali boxes this year?" Anjali asked. I was on him like all last year. I mean, sure, West Baskin isn't exactly the nucleus of all things down with brown, but with the Indian families we do have, we can celebrate and share our food and other Baskin residents. She started to clean up the grease ring as the box was slowly leaking. "Oh, by the way, Adam called a few minutes ago. He said he tried to reach you on your cell as well. Is he back from Europe yet?" she added, all in one quick breath. "Not yet, but soon," I said, reassuring myself more than her. It must not be easy being in a long-distance relationship. I mean, these days I can hardly manage one in the same time zone. By the way, I was thinking about a new breakup package. How about You've Got Mail? Kind of like the movie, but focusing on how emails are just as important as a love language. Anjali's words trailed off as I thought about dating Adam long distance and our love language as of late. It wasn't easy. In fact, Adam and I had been trying to connect over the last few days. Trying but not succeeding. Fall was one of the busiest seasons at breakup. Most clients felt it was a season of reason, a season to break up. It was the same every year. The summer with its mixture of barely dressed beach bodies, barbecues, parties, and a lot of alcohol. Usually all came together in a cocktail of euphoria and brain fog that inspired men and women alike to jump into new romantic relationships. Some people found true love at a beachside house share, which meant cutting ties with their previous true love from the Upper East Side. Others felt an inexplainable connection to the local bartender who listened attentively as they drowned their relationship sorrows in way too many margaritas, and eventually each other's bodies.
Thank you, Sonya. That was so fun. I love that each chapter starts off with this hilarious email from Breakup. It's really very funny. Great job. And Humayun, can we get you to read a little bit from your book?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Humayun. I'll be reading from my debut novel, The Wrong Side of the Court, inspired by my own experiences growing up in Regent Park. It's a coming-of-age story about a boy whose first love is basketball, but I'm going to be reading from when he finds his love interest, a girl, and it's inspired primarily by all the Bollywood movies that I watched growing up, as you shall see. Okay, I'm hopping down the stairs like I'm doing a basketball drill. As I'm about to get to the second floor, I see a dude rush past a girl, knocking her binder out of her hands and sending her papers flying. He races past me, and before I can give him a piece of my mind, he's gone. Me being me, I scramble to help. I pick up the pieces of paper, and when I've got them in a nice and tidy pile, I walk toward her to hand them over so I can be on my way. She's still gathering some papers from the ground when I tap her on her left shoulder. She turns, and it's like I got hit by a truck. Not a small truck either. I'm talking one of those big 18-wheelers lugging shit from one end of Canada to the other that you avoid driving next to on the highway, that type of truck. I mean, somebody pinch me. I've only seen someone's hair blow like that in Bollywood films. I'm taking her in, black tee with the front tucked in, skin tight, light blue jeans, nose ring. She's mixed, half white and half Asian, with black hair tied back in a bun. She's got black eyes and, oh man, those lips. They're really pink, no red. No, some color in the middle. I said I was terrible at mixing colors, didn't I? But I think the beauty mark on her left cheek is what gets me. She's waving one hand in front of me to see if I'm there. I snap out of my daze. Thanks, I can take those now, she says, tugging at the papers I've crumpled because I'm holding them too tight. There are sweat marks on them now. Worst of all, I'm ready to vomit because of how nervous I'm feeling. Oh, sorry. Here you go, I say, letting go and putting my hands in my pockets. What else would I even do with them? She puts the papers back in her binders and zips up her bag. I'm Ashley. What's your name? She says. I hate my parents right now. Fawad, I say, mouthing out the syllables to make sure there's no miscommunication. Fawad? Put me out of my misery already. Like a Awad with an F. Oh, Fawad. I like it. I've never heard that name before, she says, smiling and holding the straps of her bag. Yeah, I get that a lot, I say, trying to play it off as no big deal. I'm just headed to the basement for class. Are you going that way? She says, pointing down the stairs. Yeah, I am, I say, wiping my sweaty hands on my pants. So, shall we? She says. Yeah, let's shall. Who the hell says that? I take a deep breath in and think about what Arif would say. He'd play it cool. He'd make fun of her. He'd make her laugh some way, somehow. Your handwriting looks like chicken scratch. Excuse me? She stops and looks at me with raised eyebrows. Mayday, mayday, I'm sinking fast. Oh, it just reminded me of my doctor's writing when she writes my mom a prescription. She smiles. Sweet relief. Yeah, my mom tells me that all the time. We get to her classroom door. She looks at me and says, see you around, Fawad. Before she can turn the door handle, I say, hey, wait, are you on Snap? She lets go of the door and walks back towards me. I take out my crusty Android phone. Ashley takes it, adds herself to my Snap, and just like that, I have a way to get in touch with her. Before she enters her class, she looks back and smiles. I'm also hella late for class and will probably have to go all the way back up to the office to get a late slip. Worth it. Just before I duck into drama, I look her up on Insta. Luckily, her handle's the same, and scroll through her feed. I mean, I already know she's pretty, but damn, the girl is ballin' too. There are vacation pics, photos of her with friends in her backyard. It looks as big as the courtyard of my entire apartment building. Plus, there's a bunch of white and Asian dudes, Aarons, Michaels, Adams, and Ryans, no doubt. One of them's got his arms around her in one photo. They seem like they're really into each other. Doubt any of them can shoot a 3 like me. So I've got something going for me. Let's see how it goes.
Thank you so much for that. That was really fun too. I really enjoyed reading that scene. It was a great meet cute.
Awesome.
And since we're all like kind of romance writers here, I appreciated that very much. Okay, so let's move on to the Q&A portion. I get to ask some fun questions. I noticed that all 3 of your books, when I was reading them, a lot of them feature family or a lack of family or, you know, parents and their impact on their children and things like that. And all 3 of us talk about, all 3 of you talk about, you know, characters who are South Asian or first or second generation immigrants. In some cases Muslim. I was just wondering, how you all struggled with the weight of representing Desi parents, so South Asian parents in particular, in a way that isn't stereotypical? Because I noticed you all had really interesting ways of really extending that narrative. Farah, can I start with you?
That's an excellent question.
I know.
Yeah, totally. A lot of people have this idea in their head of what a South Asian parent is like, and my parents are here, so I'm going to be very nice to them.
Shout out to the parents.
People have this idea our parents are very strict and they are very ambitious, and in a lot of ways that's true, but it isn't always true. There's a thing that you notice when you read a lot of South Asian books, especially both adults, like younger characters, adults or YA, that the parents are always they're often portrayed the same way, as being overbearing. The story is often about the characters like pushing away from their parents' influence. And I really kind of wanted to turn that on its head, because that's not true for every South Asian family. It isn't obviously just like any other family. South Asian families are all different. Every family has their own dynamic. And showing, for Kamala Knows Best, because it's a retelling of Emma. If you're familiar with Emma, Emma has a very close relationship with her father, so that's why that's there. But I really wanted to go a little bit deeper than that. Like, why does she have a close relationship with her father? Why is she so protective over him? I gave her father, in the book, he has mental illness. He has diagnosed depression and anxiety. And it's something that is both a stigma in the book. It's both a stigma and something that's they're open about. So some people know about it, some people don't. And I think that represents how a lot of our communities are still, that we're kind of taking steps forward, but in some ways there's still that stigma against mental illness, or about being open, and about being open with your kids about what you're going through, and about kids being open with their parents. So it was very important to me to show a family that kind of breaks that stereotype of what South Asian families are like.
Yeah, you did a great job with that. Yeah. Sonia, do you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think with me, when I wrote any of the characters that were Indian, I really wanted to write from the perspective of my own point of view. And I didn't want to go down this road of how I grew up seeing Indian characters in positions of being convenience store owners or taxi cab drivers. I have never come across people in my life that do those roles or those positions. And so I was very in tune with how I was going to position my characters. And with the parents, yeah, Sammy's parents are my parents, and down to the T, where I was constantly being asked all the time as the oldest daughter when I was getting married. You know, my dad was quite strict on us because he had 3 daughters and we didn't have a brother. So, and not in a way which didn't add humor. You know, they always made the situation quite funny. And I think that's why I was able to tell stories that are funny and really relay that message throughout my book as I was sharing stories that are coming from parents. So I think for me, I wrote parents with broken English because I experienced that. And so my parents worked in factories very hard for 14 years. I wrote about that. So I didn't want to write anything that I didn't have a personal experience with.
I think that's fair. Yeah. And you actually handled the accent part really well, I thought. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Humayun, what about you? Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, absolutely. Fawad's relationship with his mother mirrors my own relationship with my mom in a lot of ways. There's definitely an uphill battle. I think when I think about sort of how parents are represented traditionally, it's kind of like what Farah was saying. There are these very typical stereotypes, but I think with stereotypes, they exist on the surface. And I think what I tried to do with my book was dig a little bit deeper into like the nuances. So even as a son, getting to know my own mom's like deepest fears and anxieties about why she wants some of the things she wants for me, for her, for family. I tried to portray that. So it's not, so there's like some rhyme and reason behind why you're an immigrant mom and you're trying so hard to hold on to your children while they're kind of straddling these realities and trying to develop their own identities. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of insecurity, and I think he has an older sister who is very rebellious and kind of goes very much against the grain, and so there's a lot of pressure on him to be like perfect and be the good son, but as he's coming of age and he's kind of developing his own identity, he realizes he needs to push back a little bit as well and kind of individuate. But then you also see like where the mom's coming from. And I think that's why, right, like being South Asian, being able to write from that perspective, like that nuance wouldn't be known or captured, I think, otherwise.
Yeah, I think it's a really, really good point. And I also like the way that you flipped kind of the script where you had the daughter be the one who didn't follow the rules in a sense, and the son was the dutiful one, because so often these are ways that we all kind of push the narrative to a certain extent. I was really captured by all 3 of your books. Kind of had a recurring element of conversations within all 3 books were about the tension between tradition and modernity, and I think that's something that's really interesting to explore. Sonia, do you want to start us off with how did your book balance the divide between ideas of living a very traditional life versus embracing more modern ideas of being?
I think for me, it was really about shadowing what I had gone through and not being able to embrace my own culture until I was in my 30s. And I was quite embarrassed, and I was not able to embrace it because of situations that I was put in as a previous TV reporter, and a lot of women at that time didn't look like me. And so I grew up where I wanted to dye my hair blonde, have blue contacts. And so I really wanted Manny, my protagonist's self-discovery journey, to really shadow what I had gone through, and to know that there was a very difficult balance. And even now, as I'm in my 40s, it still is quite difficult to balance. And I think that it took me reaching 41 to get to the point where I can fully embrace my culture. I'm so proud to be Indian. And really, I think as I was writing Manny's self-discovery journey, I was going through my own as well, too.
Yeah, that's such a good answer. I think back to when I was a young child too, and I totally agree with that. I think I was so keen to sort of embrace the outer world, and I lost a lot as a result of that. What about you, Farah? Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that's something that all of us kind of went through. So in my book, it's Kamala is she's very self-assured. She's very comfortable in her own skin. She is very, she straddles her cultures very well. She has her weekly Bollywood night where she orders biryani from around the world once a week and has all her friends over, and she brings out her ukulele and they sing Bollywood songs. But then at the same time, she has a very vibrant friend group, all races, all cultures. And she's not really struggling there. Her bigger struggle is her parents' expectations is something that she's never really kind of let go of. Her father had started this giant accounting firm, and her father had wanted her to follow in his footsteps. And for her, tradition is that corporate life, the finance accountant. And while it's something that she does love doing, she struggles with how people see her as being a very feminine. She loves to have her hair done. She loves clothes. A very feminine, very image-conscious person. That doesn't mean that she can't be also a very, very good accountant. That doesn't mean that she can't also be a champion to small businesses. So a lot of the struggle for her is the way people see her as being a super feminine TikTok star versus her work, and the way people don't take her seriously. And a lot of that is because she is an Indian woman growing up in an Indian culture, and the expectations that we have on our daughters, and the expectation that her mother had on her of being always perfect and always representing the family and representing the culture is something that she's kind of had to figure out how to deal with that. So I think that so her struggle's a bit different than just being cultural.
Definitely, there's a lot of underlays of just the internal sexism that she has, the misogyny that she has to deal with, that adds a layer of complexity to your book. Yeah, Humayun, what about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for what I think what comes to my mind is like tradition in and of itself kind of exists on a bit of a spectrum. Especially when we look at like, Pakistan, South Asia, anywhere in that world. It really depends on like where the family's coming from, and how stark that contrast is. I think for Fawad, similar to me, so like my family back home, literally we're like in a rural village that's like quite far from like the closest city. Everyone's like in either a farmer or they join the military, and those are the two options. And now they're slowly they're becoming like entrepreneurs and like starting small shops and stuff. But over there it's like cousin marriages are like a given. Like there isn't really like a dialogue or even just like arranged marriages. Whereas, I've had the opportunity now to spend time in like, Islamabad and Lahore and some of these other cities in Pakistan where, it's a completely different world. So if somebody was coming from that world and here, maybe that transition would be like less stark, or maybe that conversation would be different, at least internally. So for Fawad, like, his mom, is literally like, doesn't speak any English, has like this very, this kind of a mentality. And so he's really up at odds, because he's in Canada and he's in Toronto, and, and he has all this opportunity, and he, and he's going to this high school with a lot of privileged kids. So trying to bridge that gap, I think can be super challenging. But at the same time, like, he has a fondness for food. Like, he loves food, you know, and his mom's cooking, and he loves music and movies, and so there's different ways. So I think for me it's just like the spectrum of like how stark that contrast is between tradition and modernity.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think all of your books do a good job just adding to the nuance and the tapestry of what these stories about South Asians, about first and second generation immigrant people is about, which is really interesting. So I have to ask you, all three books have references to Bollywood, all three of you. So I think it's just something, you know, are you fans? Are you using Bollywood as sort of a shorthand to discuss Indian pop or South Asian pop culture? Do you have any recent faves to recommend to the audience? What should we all binge on Netflix or Amazon or Disney or whatever? I watched the Fame Game recently with Madhuri Dixit, who was a big.
Oh, it was so good.
It was so good. It was a '90s. It was a series. Wasn't a movie. She's like a famous '80s and '90s Bollywood star. Do any of you have any recommendations, Farah? Let's start with you.
People ask me for Bollywood recommendations all the time because there's a lot of Bollywood in this book. So my first thing to say is read the book, and any movie mentioned in there is fabulous. I picked movies I love. I grew up on Bollywood. I don't watch a ton of it as an adult. I seek out the stuff I love, and I watch that, but I'm not up to speed on it. If I was to recommend something for romance readers, definitely Khoobsurat. If any of you have seen Khoobsurat, it's actually produced by Disney, so it's a Disney princess movie in Bollywood form. It's about a prince and a king and a physiotherapist who comes to help the king with an injury, and of course she falls in love with the surly, grumpy prince, and it's lovely. But I think the reason I put Bollywood in there is it's kind of like a shorthand for culture. Not all of my readers understand Indian families and Indian dynamics, and it kind of gives us a way of, I mean, it does tie us together because a lot of people like it, but it also is a bit of a shorthand for music or for food or culture. So it's kind of a way of giving you guys a little bit of extra information about the culture.
That's great. Thank you. I don't know if we should wait. I don't know. A.O. Bandy?
It's a little protest.
I know.
There's
it's
three
great.
of them. Oh no, there's more than three.
Okay, I think they're done. What about you, Sonia? Do you have any Bollywood recs for us?
I am like the world's biggest Bollywood fan, and I grew up watching Bollywood. I still watch Bollywood. It's the only reason I have Prime. And I loved Jackie Shroff growing up, so he's one of my old Bollywood hunky crushes. My favorite Bollywood movie is Anya. So if you guys get a chance to see that, Aina stars Jackie Shroff. Yeah, it's one of my favorite movies. Recently, I just watched, I'm probably going to say this wrong, Gediya with Deepika. I don't know if you've seen that. It's on Prime as well. And Modern Love. I don't know if you guys have seen the series, but they just put out a new version which they filmed in Mumbai, and it's so good. Yeah, I binged it last week. It's so good. So if anybody ever wants any Bollywood suggestions, right here. I got them all.
I'm gonna call you.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What about you, Humayun?
Yeah, but I mean, Bollywood was like a huge family time gathering growing up. You know, it was always fun, you know, gathering around and watching the most recent like Shah Rukh Khan film. He was like kind of like the household, you know, fan favorite. And then whenever there was like a kiss or like a too much of an intimate scene, you know, you'd like fast forward or you like turn it off, or I don't know, like, you know, everyone just freaks out because you're like, oh my God, what do you do? But yeah, you know what? I mean, it's interesting looking back at some of those movies from like a more adult perspective and kind of seeing like how I think the way love is portrayed in those films is quite toxic and not very conducive to.
Lost the mic.
Oh,
Oh,
we lost
okay,
power.
got it.
Okay.
Uh,
Lost power, so just give us a. Do you want to yell or?
I can. Hello? Generator? So, yeah.
Don't be diaphragm.
Yeah. So I mean, look, so I think recently I've kind of fallen out of love with Bollywood. I think, I don't know why, maybe it's just 3 hours of watching something that I don't have the attention span for anymore, or like the new actor. Like, it used to be a lot more fantasy back then, like just like really stupid scenarios, and now it's a little bit more real, and I think like less escapist, which is also like another thing. Um, but I mean, I love Amir Khan now. I think I'm less of a Shah Rukh Khan fan. I think if I was to recommend a few movies, I really love Dil Chahta Hai, which is an awesome movie, and then Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara. I think, yeah, I don't know. I think both of them are on Netflix. So
So Dil Chahta Hai and Zindagi.
Na Milegi Dobara.
I don't know how to say that. Zindagi na milegi dobara.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Great. So each of your books have a really fun supporting cast. Lots of, I felt like all of your books had a really good sense of community, which I really enjoy reading about. And I wondered, who is your community? Do you have a writing or non-writing community that you feel welcomed and seen with? And the corollary to that question is, how welcoming has the publishing community, so the writing community in Toronto and maybe around the world, if we're talking about Twitter, been to you? Sonya, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. I guess I'm the new kid on the block. So it's actually, my book became an instant bestseller. So 2 weeks in a row, I'm the Toronto Star, the Globe and Mail. Thank you. And so that means the community really empowered me to get it to the point where I was able to make it a success as a debut. And I think that, in the beginning when I was rejected because my book was too South Asian, or it was not South Asian enough, or the fact that I was told I couldn't debut because another South Asian was debuting in the same year, to hear that coming in from agents was really tough to hear, but it gave me the extra push and really lit that fire under me to be able to go out and put this book out. I will say I don't have a community, writers community. It hasn't been that easy for me. I have found that it's been very competitive and not as embracing as I would have liked it to be, particularly with South Asian authors. And I've talked to you about that as well too. So I hope that changes, but I do know that I think that sometimes, because we are told to be competitive off the bat from agents and publishers, that sometimes that can stay with us, and it can be tricky to forget that other South Asian authors should be your didis and your sisters in the community. So I'm really hoping to build that.
Thank you. I appreciate that honesty. Publishing oftentimes can be very opaque of an industry. Like, nobody really knows where, the goalposts keep moving. And I think oftentimes BIPOC creatives have been almost conditioned to have a scarcity mindset, right? Like, there isn't enough scraps from the pie for everybody, so we all have to compete with each other. But, a rising tide, I like to think a rising tide lifts all boats. Farah, you have anything to say about that?
I agree with you completely that we should be supporting each other. If somebody, we can all read more books. Somebody can read my book and they can read Sonya's book. They don't have to pick just one. And South Asian books doing well really benefits us all. It benefits all South Asian authors. I do have a writing community here in Toronto. I joined Toronto Romance Writers right when I started writing, and I love them so much. They have a booth here. You should visit them. Toronto Romance Writers has been a great way for me to meet local authors and local like-minded romance authors. And then I do have a wider writing community that I couldn't do without. I can text any of my friends whenever I want. I do have a lot of South Asian romance writer friends. We will meet in person or online pretty regularly. But a lot of that has been building that community. I've been around the block a little bit longer. My debut came out in 2019. And it was hard at first, just like anything. When you start a new school, when you do anything, it was hard to kind of get my foot in the door and to feel like I belonged there. For the most part, I've been pretty lucky debuting in 2019. People were a little bit more open to diversity then. And I'm not saying it's been amazing, but I think I haven't seen the bigger issues that some of my friends that had debuted before that, where they were snubbed for being diverse, or that they weren't included for events and things like that. So I was pretty lucky when I started. But I love my writing community. I love the Toronto writing community, and I love my romance writing community. I wouldn't be able to do it without them.
Yeah, I think sometimes professional organizations can do a lot to reach out, whether it's the Writers Union of Canada or the Toronto Romance Community, which is quite supportive. What about you, Mayan? You're also a new kid on the block?
Yeah, very much so. New kid. So book came out March 15th of this year, and I'm just kind of like navigating and sort of like trying to make my way and understand, like, it was, I think with each kind of milestone, like it becomes less of a black box, that you're kind of just like, thrown into. And I think it's been really helpful to have like events like these and other panels to like connect with other authors. I think community is something I struggle with because I think I straddle so many different identities, like whether it's like, my professional like work identity day to day, or like all these things that I'm always doing on the side, and trying to keep pace and kind of be inserted and contribute, and because I think it's like you get what you give, right? And I think a lot of times like I just find it really hard to plug in. That in the same token though, yeah, I think I think it is a little bit challenging at times because I think when you're already late, like I remember speaking to like a white author once, and she kind of said like an offhand remark about like, oh, your book's gonna be on list because like it's diverse, right? And you hear things like that, and then you realize like, an acting friend of mine sent me this article by Deepa Mehta, and she basically it had this article about like, it doesn't matter how the opportunity comes, like if it's like whether it's like quote unquote a handout or if it's like something that's like genuine. If someone's opening a window, like jump through it. And I think that really resonated because I think that conversation of like, am I on the stage, or is this book where it is because of like how it's different, or because of like the writing and the story and like how it's connecting? And then, you got to step back and be like, maybe it doesn't matter right now. Like I think the important thing is actually that kid, I didn't have a book like this growing up that made me feel seen, and made me feel alienated. And so now there is a book, and maybe somebody who reads it feels like, hey, like my experience is like mirrored and sort of represented. And so maybe I do belong here, and so, yeah, I think it's always a bit of an uphill battle, but, just getting started. So we'll see what happens.
Thank you. That's a great answer. Very insightful. Okay, so lightning round before we get into some questions. So if anyone in the audience has any questions, you're going to get your turn very shortly. All right, so really quick, one thing you all wish you knew before you got into publishing. I'm going to let you think about that and tell you mine. One thing I wish I knew was just the idea that publishing, like any career, is a career, and your first book is just that. It'll be your first book. You'll write, hopefully, many, many more, and you'll learn and change and grow with every book that you write, whether or not it gets published. That's the thing. Some people get published on their fifth book or their sixth book. It's not always their first book. So that's one thing I wish I had known before I got into publishing. What about you, Farah?
Patience and thick skin. Patience publishing takes a long time, and sometimes that you want something to happen right away, and it's not going to. And thick skin because there's a ton of rejection from editors, from agents, and then from readers, reviews. Like you just got to bounce it all off. And what you said about like the first book, somebody, an author once said to me, she's like, a business doesn't die because of one bad product, and that kind of made me think of my career that way. This is one book, and I think it's fabulous, and I really, really love it. But if this book hadn't done well, that doesn't mean the end of my career. So patience and thick skin, and just keep going.
Awesome. Sonia?
I think that for me, it's been ebbs and flows. You can be a bestseller for 2 weeks, and then you're like, hang on, where is everybody? Why am I not important anymore? So it's really being able to understand that you got to keep yourself busy, start working on the second or third book, and that every feather in your cap counts at the end of the day.
It's awesome. Yep. Work on your next book. Maya?
Yeah, I would say like publishing is very slow. Like emphasis on the slow. Like I think for me, like, I work in the startup space. We're like used to like shipping things like within months, weeks, days. And you get used to this kind of feedback loop of like, you think up something, you design it, you code it, you ship it, you get feedback. And then with publishing, it's like you said something to your agent. They got like 20 other books, they're also going through. So they'll get back to you in a couple of months. You get your book gets bought by a publisher, and they're like, we're going to publish it a year and a half later. And you're just like, what? And it just kind of, you're like, and that's why it's sort of like, okay, you just, the only way to keep sane is to like keep work on the next thing, because it's like you're waiting. And like I don't even know, like, if I was like Gen Z and I was like hooked on TikTok and my attention span was like seconds, I wouldn't last. Like, I feel like it's like it's a challenge. So you got to develop a lot of patience.
And yet, book talk has played such a huge role.
Yeah.
I was just reading something about Agatha Christie is now really popular because all the Gen Zs are noticing.
They've discovered
They've discovered Agatha Christie. Guys, go read Agatha Christie, which is
I loved
classic.
it that they discovered Kate Bush recently.
Yeah, it's so great.
I mean, I have trouble reading. Like, I don't like. Are you guys able to like hold your attention and read a book
hard,
these
right?
days? Like, it is
depends.
hard.
It depends if I'm drafting or not.
Yeah,
Okay.
That's exactly it. What I'm working on makes a difference.
Okay, so now it's your turn, lovely audience. You've been so patient. I'm sure you all have some questions bubbling up. Just put your hands up, like school. Anyone? Don't be shy. There we go. Brave person at the back. Go ahead. Favorite words or phrases? Just individual words? Any favorite words or phrases you like to use in your writing?
Every time I finish a draft, I have to go through and delete about 200 justs. So that was probably
That's your tick.
just
That's your writing
was
tick.
Probably my favorite word.
I'm really like, I need to buy a thesaurus, because like I feel like my descriptions, like, it's like, like when I'm trying to describe something, I'll say like it's like big, but then like I'll get comments back being like, okay, but like, like what do you like what? Yeah, and so yeah, I struggle. Yeah.
I loved using Hindi and Punjabi phrases. Yeah, that was for me. A lot of it was I used to say to my mom, "You're so boggle," which means crazy, and she's like, "Are you calling me crazy?" Like, it would just go for next level, and I loved like incorporating those types of phrases into my book. Yeah.
Any other questions? I thought I saw another hand. Yes, thank you.
If your books were adapted to film or TV, do you have like a dream casting?
Okay, so dream casting for books. So when all of your books are optioned, right? Fingers crossed. When? Farah, you want to start?
I do, and I'm kicking myself because I can't remember. There was an actor that somebody put on. Who's the guy that was on? Was he on? It's killing me. He was, an American show. South Asian brown guy. There's like 5.
That narrows it down.
Who are they? Somebody's just. No.
I just saw his show last night.
Oh, I
It was
did
amazing.
too.
Oh my
So
God.
good.
tonight.
It was so
Did you see
good.
the show? For my.
Some brown guy.
There's a brown guy that
Definitely
somebody
a brown
put on
guy.
Twitter recently, and I was like, yes, that's it. And the picture was him in a suit and really hot. Really hot. Okay, so I'm gonna find out. But for my heroine, for Kamala, it's obvious. I had an image of who she was, of what she looked like when I started writing it. And it was really funny because I didn't tell anyone that image of who she looked like. And then my editor asked me, when you get to the end of the process, the editor starts saying, like, "What, we're looking at covers, what does she look like?" So I sent her the picture, and my editor's like, "That's exactly who I thought you were going to do." And it's Jamila Jamal from The Good Place. The Good Place, yeah. And that was exactly. And not many people have picked up on this, but in her character, Tahani, in The Good Place, her sister's name was Kamala. And that is actually where I got the name, because Tahani would be so pissed off that I named the book after her sister.
God, I love that show, The Good
so
Place.
it's a little bit of shade on that character,
That's
but that is
awesome.
really where I got. That is what I imagined her to look like.
Sonia, what about you?
So on the cover, you'll notice that Sammy is not wearing any socks, and he does not wear socks throughout the whole book. It's his thing. It's his like sexy thing. And I saw a picture of Riz Ahmed not wearing socks once on the red carpet, and so
Love Riz Ahmed.
I
Okay, Riz,
know.
yeah,
So
yeah.
So hot.
that's my Sammy.
Yeah.
I feel like for Manny, it would be someone who hasn't been discovered yet, similar to Never Have I Ever, the main actress who's from Ontario, I think Scarborough actually. And then, yeah, I think for Manisha it would be, I don't know if you guys know her name is Poonam Patel. Yeah, she's a kind of new. She was in Hot Mess Holiday. So I think that would be sort of my star cast. Yeah.
Humayun?
Yeah, I'm actually working on a TV pitch right now for this book that we're hoping to start getting out to people this summer. Okay, so Shah Rukh Khan's son, Aryan Khan, would be dope. He's like a
mean-
little bit older now,
Okay,
but I think
yeah.
he could still play a teen.
Nepotism, Bollywood just goes
Why
hand
not?
in hand.
I
yeah.
mean, he's promoting his daughter's show right now, so it's like you get Shah Rukh Khan to, tweet. I think that would be pretty big. And then for Ashley, maybe the girl from To All the Boys I Loved. I think she would be pretty cool.
Yeah, she's really cute. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can see that. Okay, great. I think we have time for one more question, maybe, if anybody would like to ask. Otherwise, I have a whole bunch more I could ask. Anyone? Oh, right here? Yeah. Oh, sorry. And then you, if we have time. Okay, so we all know. Okay, so are any of these autobiographies or little elements of yourself in the book? Anything at all you want to share? Tell us your secrets. Yes, Farah, go ahead.
I
Oh,
think
and
I think I can't help put a tiny bit of myself in the book. Kamala loves food. I love food. She will wax poetic about biryani or beef noodle soup forever, and I could do that too. But as a whole, I wish I was Kamala. I wish she was my best friend actually, and she would invite me to her parties. But I'm not her.
Sonia?
Well, every Dear breakup letter is a story that's happened to me in real life.
No way.
Unfortunately, yes way. And Adam is very loosely based on the ex that broke up with me as I was reading this book. So a lot of the angst that Adam is directed towards Adam is unfortunately a real guy in real life who's not here.
Very therapeutic.
It was very therapeutic.
I
Yes.
like
Okay. So, audience, never piss off a writer. This is what you have to take away from
Exactly.
this. We will put you in our books. Humayun?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Fawad's like, I think he's like 70% me, but like the 30% is like, I think me like, kind of like, if I was like a little more cooler and confident, and like I played basketball growing up. Like I was actually, I was a starter up until like grade 10 until I realized like, this wasn't going to get me anywhere. But I always choked in games. Like I didn't score like Steph Curry, but so while I was writing this, I was like, I want Fawad to score like Steph Curry, because that's how I would have wanted to score. So, but we love parathas and food and so, but yeah, he's just a little more cooler.
Yep. All of your books made me very hungry, and I wanted to eat Indian food. I think we had one more question from you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm still trying to find a way to word this, but I noticed that a lot of times, like, own voices authors will get a lot of criticism from their own community, being like, oh, you misrepresented us, or like, you made us
Yeah.
monolithic. So
true.
I'm just wondering how you kind of balance representing your own experiences while kind of, I guess, like, balancing that sort of criticism.
Great question. I'm just going to restate that so you can all hear. How own voices are oftentimes criticized by our own communities, and how do we sort of deal with that? Really good question. Farah, go ahead. Why don't you get
Yeah,
it
that's
started?
an excellent question. And that is something that happens a lot. At the end of the day, I'm not representing Indian culture in my books. I'm not representing Muslim culture in my books. I'm not representing anything but maybe my own family. And it is really, really hard. It is incredibly hard to be an author of color in the first place, to get your foot in the door. And then when you get that foot in the door and people that look like you or people that come from your own community say that you didn't get the representation right, it is hard, because that's something that we try to do and we want to put ourselves on there. But it almost feels like they are negating my own identity when somebody says, well, the book it's not really Indian culture, or it's not really, that's not what a Muslim family is like. It's like, well, you're negating my culture and me, because that's my own representation. Again, I said before, patience and thick skin. Patience, write the next book, somebody will love it. And thick skin, I'm not here to represent. I've never claimed to represent an entire culture, an entire huge country in my one little tiny book. So I just have to kind of roll it off.
That's great. Sonia?
Absolutely agree. I always say I wrote fiction, not faction. And also, it's my point of view. And I made the horrible mistake of going down the black hole of reading reviews one day, and I will never do that again. But I just, it's one of those things that just be happy for your community, your sisters, your didis. It takes one person to write the review that I read, which is like 7 paragraphs long, and just go through and disqualify everything that you've worked for, which took a lot to get here. So at the end of the day, I'm going to champion and cheerlead my sisters and my didis no matter where they are in whatever industry they are.
That's great. Maya?
And brothers and pies and
Yes,
stuff.
and pies,
Yeah. Or just say. Yeah. You know what? Honestly, debut novel, right? Like, before it came out, the publisher sent it to a bunch of people, bloggers. Like they call it like an e-arc or something, like for them to review. And I remember my very first Goodreads comment or review. I was like, oh man, somebody wrote something. I mean, it's the first time I was holding the book in my hands and stuff. And man, this lady tore me to shreds.
It must be my lady. We must have the same lady.
Goodreads is the worst.
It is the worst.
I love Goodreads. It's not good for writers.
Such a punch in the face. She literally went through every little thing was okay, we don't say this, we say we don't use mosque, we say masjid, or this or that, and then I remember at the end she was like, the way you ended the bullying was weak, or something like that, and I was like, lady, I'm gonna read this. I mean, she knows I'm gonna read this, I think, and I was just I think she took it off. I did make
Mine's still up.
Okay. And then I'm calling my publicist. I'm like, oh my God, are we is this okay? And then my publicist was like, yeah, don't worry, this happens all the time. There's a lot of policing within the community, and I think the word policing is really interesting because I think, it is sort of trying to gate what is and isn't allowed, right? And I think as creatives and as authors, we can't succumb to that because otherwise you're rehashing the stereotypes that everyone's already trying to project on you, right? And so it's again, where's the nuance, where's the reality? And so yeah, that was my experience. It sucks, but it happens. And yeah, I also don't read reviews.
Don't read reviews.
Don't read reviews.
I've had a few books out now. Don't read reviews, especially those first early reviews. They're not for you. They're for readers.
They are, definitely. Well, this was a fantastic conversation. I hope you all got as much out of this as I did. I want to take a time to thank our panelists, Farah Heron, Sonya Singh, Humayun Khan, for talking to us about their thoughts, the writing process, and their books. Be sure to head to the signing booth just outside the stage area. It will be at the Another Story Bookshop booth. Hold on, I have to read something. It's on my phone. It's all the way at the bottom. Yes. So on behalf of Word on the Street, I'd like to thank everyone. And thank you to our accessibility sponsor, Another Story Bookshop, for their generous contribution. Up next is Short Reflections, a conversation with Helen Chow, Bradley, Kim Fu, Chelsea Vowell, moderated by Kay Chong Tom. Later, we'll hear from Genevieve Graham and Lazurko, Amita Parikh, and more. And again, if any of you are so inclined, donate to Word on the Street. It is a festival that is run as a nonprofit organization. Please consider supporting the festival so that it can continue to celebrate the best in Canadian books and magazines. If you wish to make a donation, please visit the Word on the Street website at toronto.wordonthestreet.ca. And again, our lovely authors will be signing books at the Another Story Bookshop booth, which I think is the one that way. It's right behind us. Yeah. So please do support Canadian authors. All 3 of their books were absolutely delightful. And I'm Uzma Jalaluddin. If you would like to talk to me, I'll be wandering around as well. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.